Hello and welcome to Inside Politics. My name is Anastasiya Lavrina. The Chinese capital has become a vital hub for strategic coordination, hosting a succession of critical high-level visits this month. Following the recent diplomatic engagements of US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin, Beijing is now welcoming Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif alongside Military Chief Field Marshal Asim Munir. While the official agenda centers on deepening the China-Pakistan economic partnership, the broader geopolitical context cannot be ignored. Pakistan has emerged as a crucial diplomatic bridge, facilitating complex communication between Washington and Tehran to sustain a fragile Middle East ceasefire and secure regional stability. With Washington signaling that a significant portion of a new memorandum is taking shape and Tehran clarifying that essential sovereignty and maritime details must still be finalized, the stakes could not be higher. What are the core components required to sustainably reopen the Strait of Hormuz? How are Beijing, Islamabad and Washington aligning their strategic interests? And what does this multipolar coordination mean for the future of international security? Joining me now from Islamabad, Pakistan is Senator Mushahid Hussain, former Minister for Information and Culture. Senator, welcome to Inside Politics.
My pleasure indeed to be on your program. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much for joining us today. And let me start with this question. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Field Marshal Asim Munir are currently on an official 4-day visit to Beijing, where they met with President Xi Jinping. And this comes right on the heels of Beijing hosting both Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin earlier this month, turning the Chinese capital into a hub of intense global diplomacy. Does this synchronized diplomatic marathon in Beijing indicate that China and Pakistan are co-authoring a unified long-term stabilization plan for the Middle East?
Well, this is a very important visit at a very significant time in regional and global geopolitics. And I would say that this visit of the Pakistan Prime Minister and the Army Chief Field Marshal Syed Asim Munir has three dimensions. There is the bilateral dimension of Pakistan-China relations, and we are celebrating now the 75 years of the establishment of diplomatic relations. Then there is the regional dimension, where the Pakistani side is playing the role of a mediator between Iran and the United States, with the active support and cooperation of China, because Pakistan and China are on the same page regarding South Asia and the Middle East and the prospects of peace. And the third dimension is global, because the world is transforming. The world is turbulent. Global geopolitics has seen the recent visit of President Trump to China, and there are changes in our region also. So that is the third dimension that is also being discussed, because we see a shift in the global balance of power from the West to the East. So all these three dimensions are being addressed simultaneously during the visit of the Pakistan Prime Minister, where we are also discussing, of course, the new emerging regional security architecture in the Middle East and South Asia, where China is a very pivotal partner of Pakistan, and China is a major global player, because ultimately any situation that emerges for peace between Iran and US, China could eventually be a guarantor of that as a permanent member of the UN Security Council. So yes, there are different dimensions, and the new situation that has emerged in the region is one of them.
Senator, absolutely. During these high-level meetings at Great Hall of the People in Beijing, President Xi Jinping officially commended Pakistan for its proactive role and mediation efforts aimed at restoring peace in the Middle East. Does President Xi's explicit public endorsement today signify that China is moving out of the diplomatic shadows to provide Pakistan with full political and economic backing to seal this US-Iran Memorandum of Understanding?
Well, you should know that Pakistan and China are very close friends, very close strategic partners. And President Xi Jinping, in his meeting today with the Pakistan Prime Minister and with the Field Marshal, said that Pakistan-China friendship is unbreakable. So he used very strong language to describe the cordiality, the intimacy, the warmth, and the closeness of Pakistan-China relations. And in that regard, I would say that China's endorsement of Pakistan's initiatives for peace shows that both Beijing and Islamabad are coordinating. Both Beijing and Islamabad have the same perspective on the regional situation, on how to resolve this conflict between Iran and the United States. And finally, that in any settlement, Beijing would be solidly behind Pakistan. So China is putting its full weight as a global power behind Pakistan's efforts to ensure that these efforts prove successful.
Absolutely. In the wake of tragic BLA suicide train bombing in Pakistan targeting security forces, Prime Minister Sharif used his meeting in Beijing to formally reaffirm Pakistan's firm resolve to ensure foolproof security for Chinese nationals, institutions, and investments. In response, President Xi Jinping reiterated Beijing's rock-solid all-weather support for Pakistan's national independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity, stating that China will always prioritize Pakistan in its neighborhood diplomacy. Given the persistent threat from separatist militant group trying to disrupt bilateral projects, how can Islamabad and Beijing elevate their joint security mechanism? And does President Xi's strong reassurance today imply a deeper, more integrated intelligence and counterterrorism cooperation under this ironclad partnership?
Yes, this is a very important issue, not just for Pakistan in terms of internal security and stability, but it's also important for China relations, given that Pakistan is hosting the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC, which is one of the biggest projects under the Belt and Road Initiative of President Xi Jinping, and under which there are over 100 projects of China in Pakistan, including 40 under CPEC. And there are about thousands of Chinese technicians, engineers, and experts working in Pakistan. And sometimes there are attacks on these projects and personnel, and we feel that these are sponsored from outside Pakistan by the enemies of Pakistan-China friendship. So it is very important that Pakistan and China jointly work together on a security mechanism based on an integrated intelligence sharing and security coordination approach, so that the Chinese projects in Pakistan can move forward and progress smoothly, and the safety and security of Chinese experts, technicians, and engineers working in Pakistan on different projects, that is provided foolproof security. And there is no doubt that discussions would also be centering on this new security mechanism, given the threat that is very much there from terrorists and extremists as well as separatists, particularly in the province of Balochistan, and that which is bordering Afghanistan, by the way, and that needs to be countered. So yes, that is a very important element in the current relationship between China and Pakistan.
Senator, during bilateral meetings, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif underscored Pakistan's commitment to the high-quality development of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor Phase 2, focusing heavily on industrialization, digital transformation, and agricultural tech. Concurrently, Pakistan's Uran development framework is being actively aligned with China's 50th five-year plan to boost economic stabilization. So, how does Pakistan's simultaneous mediation between the US and Iran impact these economic goals? And can a stabilized post-war Middle East unlock the true regional potential by finally connecting China through Pakistan directly to the global energy markets?
We should know that Pakistan, given its location, given its role, and its track record in relations with China and other countries, is emerging as the hub of regional connectivity between South Asia, between Central Asia, and between West Asia with China. For example, the Pakistani port of Gwadar on the Arabian Sea, close to the Strait of Hormuz in the Persian Gulf, has been built with Chinese assistance. And that is the centerpiece today of the CPEC. And many of the ships that were stranded in the Strait of Hormuz during the recent conflict were diverted to Gwadar. And Central Asian republics like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan, all of which are basically countries that are landlocked. They would like to be land-linked through the port of Gwadar because we are the shortest outlet to the sea for these Central Asian republics. And similarly, Afghanistan also is a landlocked country. So given this context, and we have also opened up new trade corridors for Iran, for overland trade between Pakistan and Iran and Pakistan. So given that context, I think that China, which is a very major global trading partner, because in the United Nations membership, there are 193 countries which are members. Out of those 193 countries, 140 countries have more trade with China than they have with the United States. So China, through the Belt and Road Initiative and through the CPEC, would be very positive in encouraging Pakistan to play that role of a hub of regional connectivity, linking these regions together to promote trade and commerce, sea routes and land routes.
Absolutely. And we have to remember that over the weekend, US President Donald Trump announced on Truth Social that a memorandum of understanding with Iran is largely renegotiated. Almost simultaneously, the Iranian Foreign Ministry moderated this optimism, stating that critical structural gaps remain. Amidst this, Pakistan Chief of Army Staff Field Marshal Asim Munir conducted urgent late-night talks in Tehran before immediately flying to Beijing. We already discussed with you that Pakistan has effectively become the primary diplomatic conduit holding the fragile peace process together. But from your perspective, how close is Islamabad to sealing this diplomatic triumph, and where do the fundamental points of friction lie between President Trump's optimism and Tehran's caution?
I think that it's a matter of pride and honor for Pakistan that we are today the principal channel of communication between Washington and Tehran. Whatever Washington communicates to Tehran, it is via Islamabad. And whatever Tehran communicates to Washington, it is via Islamabad. So our role is quite pivotal in this peace process. And basically, Field Marshal Sayyid Asim Munir went to Tehran to tape up the whole thing. I would say that, as they say in football, we are almost in the D, and the goal is about to be scored. It's almost there. There are some issues to be taped up. From the Iranian side, I think the important issue is of assets, frozen assets. And because there about $12 billion is held up in Qatar, frozen by the United States. They are very keen that once this deal is signed, they get that. From the American side, it's also about the enriched uranium, what to do with that, and how to lessen that or whether to relocate it. So these are issues, but I would say these are now technical issues. Basically, both sides, I think, have the battle fatigue. Both sides have no appetite for a new war. And especially Mr. Trump wants an off-ramp because he knows an election is coming up, and if this war continues, it will be politically damaging for him. And Iran also has faced a lot of devastation, destruction, and deaths because of the bombings from Israel and the United States. So both sides are ready for a peace process. So we feel we are almost there. Day after tomorrow, there's the Eid al-Adha, which is the Muslim holiday celebration all over the world. I would say by the first week of June, this whole process will be there. An MOU, a memorandum of understanding, will be ready for signature from both sides, and hopefully in Islamabad, inshallah.
Senator, I guess you will agree with me that the central point of contention in the current draft MOU revolves around the Strait of Hormuz. The US is demanding immediate demining and free navigation, while Tehran categorically states that the strait remains under its sovereign jurisdiction and will only reopen once the US naval blockade on Iranian ports is lifted. Given your vast experience in regional security, what is the realistic compromise here, and can Pakistan propose a maritime security formula that satisfies the US demand for open trade routes without infringing upon Iran's national sovereignty?
First of all, let's be very clear. The Strait of Hormuz is not the cause of the war. It is the consequence of the war.
Absolutely.
Because the Strait of Hormuz was always open. It was opened on 27th February. It was opened on 28th February. Once there was this attack on Iran, which was, in our view, wrong and illegal and unjust and unwarranted by the US and Israel, then the Iranians used the Strait of Hormuz as a weapon. So that is the context. And if you also remember, last month in April, Field Marshal Asim Munir had gone, I think it was in the middle of April, 17th or 18th April, he had gone to Iran and he had convinced the Iranians to lift the control or closure of the Strait of Hormuz. And the Iranians had announced that the Strait of Hormuz is open. But the Iranians were expecting, and rightly so, that as a consequence of their unilateral action of opening up the Strait of Hormuz, the Americans would lift their blockade of Iran. Unfortunately, the Americans did not lift the blockade, and the Iranians then withdrew their unilateral opening of the Strait of Hormuz. So the Iranian side has shown flexibility, and I feel that these actions will be taken simultaneously. Iran will allow, even yesterday in the last 24 hours, 34 ships have been escorted by Iran through the Strait of Hormuz after paying the tolls and whatever. I feel that both sides are showing flexibility. Iran would open up the Strait of Hormuz and for international navigation, because after all, that is an international waterway under international law. So it is not under control of one or two countries. It has to be an open, free passage on the condition that the Americans will also lift the blockade. And the two will do it simultaneously, and then the demining process will take place, which Iran has placed the mines. So I think that this issue has been resolved once in the past, thanks to Pakistan's mediation. And Pakistani advice was followed by the Iranians. Unfortunately, there was no reciprocity from the American side, and hence this problem is there. But now I feel that both sides are ready for this deal on the Strait of Hormuz as well.
Another important element of these discussions is that Iranian negotiators have explicitly signaled to Pakistani mediator that any temporary truce with the United States cannot be isolated bilateral agreement. It must include a targeted ceasefire in Lebanon. Concurrently, hardline political factions in the region are publicly advocating for a resumption of military operations on the Lebanese front. Senator, is there a risk that the volatile dynamics in Lebanon could collapse the fragile framework that Pakistan is building between Washington and Tehran?
You see, the Iranian position is, and that was initially accepted also by Pakistan as well as the US, that there has to be a comprehensive, durable peace in the Middle East. You can't compartmentalize peace. You cannot segment peace. You cannot divide peace, that peace in one region and war in the other region. And Lebanon is an offshoot. It's also a consequence of the war against Iran, because Israel has been launching attacks on Lebanon. And that's why Mr. Trump, on the advice of Pakistan after the discussion with Iran, said that there will be a peace talks between Iran and between Lebanon and Israel, and there should be peace in Lebanon also. So Lebanon is part of the peace process, and that was initially agreed upon. And if you remember, President Trump's initial tweet also mentioned that about Lebanon. So Lebanon has to be included, and I think that yes, we do feel that there are hardline people. Basically, it's the Israel lobby in the U.S. and it's Mr. Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, who's hawkish in that regard, and there are some hawks in the U.S. system as well. But I think Mr. Trump, the President of the United States, is very clear. He has had enough of this war, and he knows that it is becoming an unwinnable war without end. And this war can sink him into the Iran quagmire politically and strategically, and he doesn't want that because they have not been able to subdue and subjugate Iran despite the heavy bombing. So the best thing is there has to be a compromise on both sides with flexibility. And I think Mr. Trump has agreed that he will try to control and rein in Mr. Netanyahu, his close ally.
Senator, and my last question. In your recent addresses at international forums, you have consistently argued that the era of unilateral Western dictates in the Middle East and South Asia has passed, giving way to the rise of capable Muslim middle powers, possessing significant defense and strategic depths. Would you say that the current scenario where a nuclear-armed Pakistan backed by China is actively setting the parameters of de-escalation for a Western superpower is a living proof of your theory regarding the birth of a new regional order?
I think, yes, there's no doubt that the world is being transformed. The existing institutions under the so-called liberal Western-led international order have failed to deliver it. They have failed to resolve the problem. Look at the problem which Azerbaijan faced itself of Nagorno-Karabakh. Their territory was occupied illegally by Armenia. The UN resolutions were there. International community was there. They failed to resolve it. And then Azerbaijan defended its territory and liberated its occupied territory. And Pakistan and Turkey were among the supporters. So this is an example. And even now, on Iran peace process, where is the UN? Where is the European Union? Where is the Arab League? Where is the Islamic Conference? Where? They are not doing anything. It's Pakistan which is playing that role, along with friends in Turkey or Saudi Arabia or China. Sadly, I'm sorry to say that. But so, in the new international order, major middle powers will have to play a role to preserve the UN Charter, to protect international law. Azerbaijan did it on its own, and we welcome that because Azerbaijan is a brotherly country and we fully support Azerbaijan in defense of its territorial integrity, unity and sovereignty against aggression from outside, which was the case of Nagorno-Karabakh. And we are now doing the same. So the world order is shifting and major Muslim middle powers are emerging. And welcome to the new world order. And I think that's very good because that will lead to some semblance of stability in different regions, that these key countries can play a role together. But the important thing is they have to work together. That is why we have established a quartet of Pakistan, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt also. And I think that in the new emerging order in the Gulf, you will find that there will be many countries, not just Saudi Arabia, which wants a defense deal with Pakistan, but Qatar also and other countries that will seek that kind of security through regional countries rather than long distance waiting for help from Washington or London, because that was not forthcoming.
Sure. Senator, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining Inside Politics today.
My pleasure. All the best to you.
Thank you. Well, the active coordination we are witnessing underlines a significant trend in global governance, the rise of regional-led diplomacy. Pakistan's constructive role as a diplomatic bridge between Washington and Tehran, supported by strategic consultations with Beijing, demonstrate that multilateral stability increasingly relies on regional partners who possess the trust of all sides. We'll continue to track these diplomatic efforts and their impact on global stability very closely. Thank you for being with us today. I'm Anastasiya Lavrina, and this was Inside Politics. I will see you next edition.